In September 1994, Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley walked onto the stage at the MTV Video Music Awards and delivered a long, intensely scrutinized kiss on live television. The public reaction was immediate and dismissive. Most observers saw the moment as a calculated display, a distraction meant to shift attention away from the severe legal allegations Michael had settled earlier that year. In reality, the marriage was a meeting of two individuals whose shared history of isolation drew them together under the relentless pressure of global celebrity. Examining Michael's early life reveals a man seeking a stability he had never actually known, struggling to reconcile his public status with a private life that was often empty. By his early 20s, Michael Jackson had achieved a level of fame that made him the most recognizable person on Earth. Everywhere he went, he faced oceans of screaming crowds and sold-out stadiums. Yet that adoration existed alongside a profound loneliness. He spent years searching for a simple life, a wife, a family, and a home that seemed permanently out of reach. The very scale of his fame became the barrier that prevented him from forming the ordinary human connections he spent his life looking for. His isolation started early. By the time he was 5 years old, he was already performing, and before most children reached the first grade, he was the center of a world-famous family act. His father, Joe Jackson, ran the family with strict discipline. Affection was rarely shown, and Michael later described a childhood defined by hard work and a constant fear of making eye contact with his own father. He spent his youth in dressing rooms and on tour buses. There were no normal friendships, no school days, no birthday celebrations. Milestones that were exchanged for a life of constant professional performance. Later in life, the construction of the Neverland Ranch served as a physical attempt to reclaim those lost years. The Ferris wheels and zoo animals were a way to build the childhood he never actually had. This environment left him searching for a way to manage adult relationships without the benefit of a normal emotional foundation, often struggling to keep pace with the world around him. When he reconnected with Lisa Marie Presley in the early 1990s, he found someone who shared that unique burden. As the daughter of Elvis Presley, she was one of the few people alive who understood the reality of his world. Both had grown up in grand estates that functioned as both homes and monuments. Graceland and Neverland were physical reminders of the isolation that came with their family names. Their conversations on the phone became a lifeline. Michael eventually declared his love, telling her he wanted to get married and expressing a deep, immediate desire for them to have children together. Their bond was built on this shared understanding of a life lived inside a cage, moving at a speed that people outside their world could rarely comprehend. Just weeks after her divorce from Danny Keough, Lisa Marie and Michael were married in a secret ceremony in the Dominican Republic on May 26, 1994. Private moments between them revealed the depth of Michael's isolation. He reportedly admitted to a lack of prior intimacy, a confession that underscored how far his path into adulthood had strayed from the norm. There was also the issue of Michael's health. Following a severe scalp injury in 1984, he had become increasingly dependent on prescription painkillers, a habit that put an immense strain on their daily life. Lisa Marie felt a strong drive to help him. She admitted to wanting to save him from his own history, believing that her support could be the factor that allowed him to finally find peace. While the public saw a union of pop dynasties, the marriage itself struggled against the heavy combined weight of Michael's past trauma and his growing medical dependencies. Despite their early intentions to build a home and raise a family, the marriage lasted only 2 years and produced no children. The relationship eventually broke under the pressure of Michael's unresolved personal issues and his worsening reliance on medication. Even genuine affection proved insufficient to heal the isolation that had defined Michael's life since he was a child. Following their divorce, the two remained emotionally connected for years, even as Michael eventually sought fatherhood through other means. After Michael's death in 2009, Lisa Marie expressed a deep, lasting grief. Her posthumous memoir later confirmed that despite the complications and the public skepticism, their love had been real. In the end, the true story of Michael Jackson's private life is not just one of a global superstar, but of a man who spent his life trying to find the simple normalcy that his own fame had taken away. Paparazzi bulbs and aggressive tabloid headlines defined Michael Jackson's public fatherhood. Those lenses captured a series of controversies: the veils and hoods used to hide his children in airports, and the 2002 incident in Berlin where he briefly held his infant son over a balcony. Following the end of his marriage to Lisa Marie Presley in 1996, Jackson was consumed by a specific fear that his dream of fatherhood would never be realized. This anxiety was rooted in his own childhood trauma. Having grown up afraid of his own father, he was determined to avoid repeating those same damaging patterns. The loud public myth of an eccentric superstar stood in direct opposition to the private efforts of a man trying to break a generational cycle of trauma. The origin of his family began in the mid-1980s, inside a clinical Beverly Hills dermatology practice. There, he met medical assistant Debbie Rowe. She treated him for vitiligo with a level of professionalism that ignored his global celebrity status. Over time, their friendship became a deep bond of trust. Understanding his desire for a family, Rowe eventually offered to carry his children, an act motivated by loyalty rather than a financial transaction. When Rowe became pregnant, Jackson's mother Catherine intervened. Consistent with her Jehovah's Witness faith, she urged Michael to marry Rowe to legitimize the children. On November 13, 1996, the two were married in a small private ceremony in Sydney, Australia, organized on short notice while Jackson was mid-tour. This arrangement led to the births of Prince and Paris Jackson, both conceived through artificial insemination. This was not a traditional Hollywood romance, but it provided the pragmatic, trust-based foundation Jackson required to build a family. By 2000, the relentless intrusion of the media reached a breaking point for Debbie Rowe. She asked for a divorce and withdrew entirely from public life. Rowe relinquished full custody of the children without contest, citing her complete trust in Michael as a devoted father. The controversial masks worn by the children were actually Rowe's request. She feared kidnap threats and obsessive photographers, and saw the coverings as a necessary shield. Paris Jackson later confirmed that when she was out without her father, the masks granted her the gift of public anonymity. In 2002, Jackson's commitment to fatherhood continued with the birth of his third child, Bigi, via an anonymous surrogate. These protective barriers, the masks and the anonymous surrogacy, formed a deliberate architecture of privacy, designed to give the children a life the public could not touch. Day-to-day life inside Neverland Ranch followed a consistent and disciplined routine. Beyond the amusement park rides and zoo animals, the children's upbringing was governed by a strict, structured parenting style. Jackson was a hands-on parent. He cooked soul food, changed diapers through the night, and spent hours playing on the floor and building blanket forts. He used a unique educational currency, requiring his children to read a specific number of books before they could earn toys or other rewards. Behind the gates of one of the world's most scrutinized properties, the daily reality was aggressively and intentionally normal. The legacy of this upbringing is evident in the clear-eyed perspective of Jackson's adult children today. This foundation eventually allowed Paris to heal and build a relationship with her biological mother, Debbie Rowe, in the years following her father's death. His brother Jermaine later observed that Michael successfully provided both the maternal and paternal emotional care that their own father was unable to give. The superstar who was denied his own childhood managed to successfully shield his children from the pressures of the celebrity machine. Michael Jackson's greatest achievement was breaking a cycle of generational trauma to become the precise father he had always needed. June 25, 2009. The whole world was waiting, right? Tickets were totally sold out for 50 massive concerts at the O2 Arena in London. This monumental comeback tour, This Is It, was literally just weeks away. But instead of a triumphant return to the stage, the music just stopped. Everything came to a sudden, tragic, and complete halt. Things shifted incredibly fast. At just 50 years old, Michael Jackson was found unresponsive in his rented LA home. By 2:26 p.m., he was officially pronounced dead at UCLA Medical Center. And then just days later, on July 7th, that massive public memorial took place at the Staples Center. When you step back and look at how this played out, it's a massive sudden whiplash. We're talking about a world pivoting instantly from anticipating the spectacular pop music comeback to mourning a genuinely shocking loss. And right at the very center of that massive shockwave, three kids: Prince, who was 12, Paris, 11, and Bigi, who was just 7 years old. So, let's take a look at the immediate aftermath and explore this truly unprecedented global goodbye. 1 billion. Just let that number sink in for a second. An estimated 1 billion people tuned in live to watch the Staples Center Memorial. It is absolutely staggering. That is the largest televised memorial in human history. To put that into perspective, the entire globe practically stopped in its tracks to watch, to grieve, and to process the end of an era. It really shows you the unimaginable, record-breaking scale of his fame. But amidst all of that, the billion-person spectacle, the unprecedented media frenzy, there was this incredibly heartbreaking contrast. You had the tearful, raw intimacy of an 11-year-old girl who'd actually never spoken publicly before. When Paris Jackson stepped up to that microphone and delivered these words, it just pierced right through all the noise. For that one moment, it wasn't about the king of pop anymore. It was just about a little girl who had suddenly lost her dad. Right after that overwhelming, very public goodbye, the family made a really crucial decision. Michael's mother, Katherine Jackson, stepped in as the guardian for all three children, and they deliberately retreated from that blinding spotlight. Instead of growing up on camera like you might expect, they were raised very quietly in a family compound in Encino, California. They were surrounded by aunts, uncles, and honestly, over 40 cousins. They were finally given the chance to just breathe and just be a family. Okay, let's fast forward a bit. Let's dive into who they became and what the children are up to today. Today, it is fascinating to see how the siblings have carved out such incredibly unique paths for themselves. You've got Prince, who is now 29, heavily focused on TV production and philanthropy. Then there's Paris, 27, who has really stepped into the creative world of modeling, acting, and music. And Bigi, at 23, has chosen a much more private, family-focused life. It's really interesting to see how each of them has navigated the immense weight of this unique legacy in entirely different ways. It seems Prince really took his father's words to heart here. He actually went on to attend Loyola Marymount University and then founded the Heal Los Angeles Foundation. They do amazing work focusing on education and nutrition for underserved youth. So he's very directly continuing his father's humanitarian efforts, which is pretty awesome. And on a personal level, he's actually spoken openly about wanting kids of his own someday, specifically so he can emulate the exact way Michael parented him. Now, Paris, on the other hand, has definitely been the most public of the three. She signed with IMG Models, she acts in film and TV, and she even performs with her own band. But you know what's really striking? She hasn't just shared her art. She's been incredibly, bravely open about her personal struggles. She's spoken candidly about her mental health journey, even discussing a period of hospitalization during her teens and navigating her personal identity. She's also been very open about reconnecting with her biological mother, Debbie Rowe. She has essentially tackled the harsh reality of the public eye head-on. And despite navigating her own really complex relationship with fame, her loyalty to her dad remains absolutely unwavering. This is such a powerful, direct statement, isn't it? It just completely cuts through any tabloid narrative out there. You can really tell she inherited his directness, and she uses it fiercely to protect the man she knew. And finally, we have Bigi, who a lot of people might remember as Blanket. He's 23 now, and remember, he was only 7 when his father passed away. Because of that, he obviously doesn't carry the exact same wealth of memories as his older brother and sister. And today, he remains by far the most private of the three. He rarely speaks publicly or pops up in the media. People close to him describe him as very quiet, very thoughtful. They say he really carries his father's presence with him, just in much more private, subtle ways. This brings us to a really crucial part of this explainer. Let's look at what that love actually looked like behind closed doors. The private father. The source material here highlights a really fascinating tension that defined his entire life. On one hand, you have this public caricature, right? A life completely distorted by unparalleled fame, complex legal troubles, and just this intense, non-stop media obsession. Michael Jackson was a man who was quite literally incapable of having an ordinary life. But then on the flip side, we see a private father who fiercely craved ordinary love. When you actually look at the testimony of his children and the people who watched him parent, that whole intense public caricature just completely falls apart. Honestly, what's most surprising about all this is just how completely normal it was. The actual accounts of the people who were there, they tell us he was up changing diapers at 3 in the morning. He cooked soul food and actually taught his daughter how to make sweet potato pie from scratch. He handed out books instead of toys, making the kids actually earn their rewards by reading. He'd get right down on the floor to play pranks and invent stories. And those infamous masks that everyone talked about, the accounts make it clear he covered their faces not out of shame, but out of absolute terror. It was this desperate need to protect them from the consuming, relentless world that he himself had barely survived. So, the absolutely crucial takeaway is this. He gave his children the childhood he never had. When you stop and think about his own upbringing, growing up in the relentless, blinding glare of the Jackson 5, managing to give his kids a safe, magical, and fiercely protected environment was arguably his ultimate triumph. You could even say it was the most Michael Jackson thing he ever achieved. I think Paris just beautifully synthesizes this entire legacy with this thought. Behind the biggest, most eccentric superstar on the planet was, quite simply, a deeply loving, surprisingly normal dad who was just trying his absolute best to protect his kids. It really hits home. So, let's end this explainer on a lingering thought. How does understanding the private father change the way we view the public icon? When we finally strip away the media circus, the billion-viewer memorials, and that unparalleled level of fame, how does the reality of a devoted dad making sweet potato pie and changing diapers at 3 a.m. reshape our entire understanding of the man? It is definitely something to think about. Until next time, keep questioning what you see and keep seeking the full picture.